Right. So today we are talking about culinary world schooling, our local seasonal sustainable learning on the move. So we are talking about moving around the world and learning world schooling. I know this might be a out of the box concept for a lot of people, but it is the way that a lot of people are functioning these days, and it is a
That's
wonderful
right.
option to consider. And I don't know necessarily if you have to move around the world necessarily, but your state of mind does, right? And I think it's critical in these times. So I am so excited to not only talk about two of my favorite things, traveling and food. I mean, this is this is bliss, okay? And I'm so grateful to Karen for joining us, Karen Ricks, and she will introduce herself, let you know who she is, what she does, where she is, and listen carefully because this is I love this story. Okay, so Karen, take it away.
Thank you so much, Cecile. I am incredibly honored and excited to be here and to talk with you about my favorite subjects as well. We get to talk food, we get to talk travel, and we get to talk education.
Yeah.
So we are right in my wheelhouse. I'm so excited. For introduction, my name is Karen Ricks, and I am the head chef of Our Kitchen Classroom. And I call myself a culinary world schooler. I am a chef, I am an educator, I am a wife and a mother. And for the past, wow, almost going on 4 years now, my family and I have been nomadic, literally traveling from one city to the next, one country to the next, one continent to the next. And in the process of all of this traveling, we are cooking, we are learning, we are exploring, and we're living our best lives
Living your best
together.
life.
And
I love
it
it.
is, they're not separate things. They're all beautifully and magnificently interwoven. And that's why I'm excited to share little snippets of our life and journey with you, as well as helping to expand your listeners' thought processes around
Absolutely.
what food and travel and learning can look like, because I
Absolutely.
think that's the beauty of world schooling.
I totally agree. I think we're in a time right now where people are really thinking about, oh my gosh, the education of our children, right? And it's really
Yes,
the the
yes.
the focus and the onus is now on families. Some of us are prepared because we've been through this. We know certain things. Some of us are going to need a little bit more help. So that's where, hopefully some information can come to you where you can think more broadly, as you said. I love that you said, I mean, this is called evolve education, right? Education is
That's right.
certainly evolving. Okay.
Yes, it
And it's
is.
evolving rapidly. And so first of all, the first thing, how did you and your family decide, all right, we're just going to just roam around the world and just cook?
This
Mhm.
is absolutely not a decision that we embarked upon lightly. In fact, my husband and I met and married in the United States, where we were both born and raised, and spent the first 7 years of our marriage teaching and traveling around the US. We had traveled some internationally as a couple as well. And back in 2007, my husband was offered this amazing teaching opportunity with the largest English language school in all of Japan. And
Mm.
so we left our lives there in the United States and we picked up and we moved to Japan. And it was supposed to just be for a year. And
Um,
yes. As
mhm.
I like to say, we made one set of plans, but God had something else entirely in mind for us. And that 1 year turned into 10. So
Wow.
we literally spent the first decade of our lives outside of the US living and growing as a family and
I love
building up our business in central Japan. Our son was born there.
Wow.
I founded an international Montessori school there, and we created this completely different life than we had ever expected to.
Wow. Wow.
And after many years of living and building community, we really enjoyed, loved the life that we were living
Mhm.
there. But another once in a lifetime opportunity came along, and I was invited to join a very small cohort of cooking professionals at a school in Italy. And so we sold it all, packed up and left Japan and moved to Italy. And we have been on the move ever since.
I love that. I love the serendipity of it. I love how you made the best out of the serendipity of it. I love that you did Montessori, which is something that I've been thinking about doing a certification in. We got to talk about that because I love
Absolutely.
Montessori education. I think that it's the way of the future in education in terms of the process, um, and the training for teachers as well. So I think that's wonderful. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's I just love the serendipity. So now tell us where you are. Where did you go after Italy, and where are you
Okay,
now?
so Italy, we've actually lived in a couple of different regions of Italy, but we went from Japan to Italy to the UK, to Mexico, back to the United States to visit some friends and family. We went back to Japan, Australia,
On
New
calling you.
Zealand.
It keeps on calling you.
We have been back again to the U.S., again, visiting friends and family. As I said, we returned to Italy, this time in a completely different region. We moved to Albania. We've been through Greece and North Macedonia, and we are currently back in Tirana, the capital city of Albania in Eastern Europe.
I love it. The first thing I said was nobody thinks to go to Albania, but that's probably the best place to go then. Right?
Exactly.
I mean, I'm just saying, you got to think outside the box here, okay?
Well, and what's most amazing to me is how Albania even popped up on our radar. Living and working this sort of dual life, both in person and online, we have widely and vastly expanded our community of friends and mentors and other people with whom we can share resources and information.
Yes.
And it was in an online community that I met and got to know a number of other not only digital nomads, like we are moving around as a family, but also world schooling. And that's how I learned about Albania from a woman with whom I worked for many years as a business mentor, who was also a digital nomad, an incredible entrepreneur who was living in Albania with her family.
Nice.
And talked about how wonderful a place it was for families, especially for people with young children. So literally, not having been able to clearly identify where Albania was on the map years ago, the last time we were in Italy, we were looking at the map going, where do we want to go next? And oh, by the way, there's Albania just on the opposite side of the Adriatic from Italy. And so we're looking and, it's only a quick hour-and-a-half flight. This was the first country in which we landed, not knowing anybody who lived here at the time. The person who introduced the concept of the country even was not living here. So we didn't know anybody who lived here, didn't speak a word of the language, didn't know anything about the history, the culture, nothing. But we landed here, immediately connected with some really amazing, incredible Albanians, very welcoming, very open, and we fell in love with the place. And
I love that.
It's just been one of so many incredible opportunities of which we've been able to take advantage in our travels.
I love it. What is the name of the language in Albania? What do they speak? Russian?
Albanian.
Albanian. Okay. I always think Eastern European and Russian and then whatever other language. That's all my mind always goes to.
I thought so too. And what's interesting about the Albanian language is it doesn't belong to a Russian language family or Greek language family or Germanic. It's kind of in its own little special bubble, which is another opportunity for deep diving into the language, its roots, its histories. It's not like any language I've ever studied before.
And that is what
I happen to consider myself kind of a hobbyist linguist. So
that's
it's very interesting.
that tells me that their nationalism is very strong. Their culture is very strong.
Yes.
That's what that tells me, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's great. And I'm very curious now because I've never really thought about, looking into the history of Albania, but I'm sure that must be quite intriguing for them
It's
to.
fascinating. It
Yeah,
really and truly is,
nice.
especially if you know anything about any of the surrounding countries,
Correct. Yeah.
the politics, the history, not
Hmm.
just within the Balkans, but throughout Eastern Europe.
Right. Yeah. That's why I'm like, I'm definitely going to be doing some research on that. Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I love that. And you can share anything that, you feel is um, interesting to share within that during this conversation. But you also mentioned Macedonia, and I'm mentioning these countries because I really want people who are listening to this to talk about these countries and these places and seek out, people from these places and things like that, because I think that's so important to expanding ourselves. We can tend to be, there's nothing wrong. You can be nationalist and still be aware of other people, places, it strengthens you, I think.
Yes, it
So
does.
Macedonia is another intriguing place to me, right? Because when we think about
Mhm,
Macedonia, I think we think about the Bible and, certain things.
mhm, mhm.
And I'm sure that there's some intriguing things to discuss around that. However,
Oh,
in the interest of time, now we have some
yeah.
extra time at the end. We'll come back to
Okay.
it now, but I really want you to talk about your schooling your son
Mhm.
through the process of learning local foods and culinary arts, because it is an art. My sister is
Yes,
a
it
chef
is.
and she is so like into being a chef. She's like, no, you have to use this ingredient and this is tastes better with that. I'm like, this is science.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
let's talk about it. Let's just get
I
into it.
love I love that you mentioned both the art and the science, because what I have always enjoyed about food as a medium of learning is that it incorporates absolutely everything. Every possible academic
I
subject you can think of, you can pursue through food. Every single sense that
agree.
we have as human beings is impacted through food. And as part of my Montessori teacher training and through my years of teaching experience, I've always incorporated lots of different aspects of this multi-sensorial education that involves food. Montessori classrooms all over the world have children making snacks or even preparing meals for one another. Children get used to, slicing bananas with a butter knife, even, from toddlerhood,
I've seen that.
and eating and drinking themselves from the time that they can sit up and hold their own cup or utensils or just using their hands. But even as children progress through the kindergarten and elementary levels and beyond, the lessons incorporate things like sound
Mm,
and smell and
mm,
taste. So it's not at all unusual for food to be one of the learning materials
mm,
in a Montessori educational environment. But what's more impactful, from my perspective, is the fact that food is not something that can be very narrowly kind of boxed into one specific academic category. We're not just reading recipes and talking about and understanding what words they're using and what they mean and how you go about doing. You read, and then the comprehension is very clear by how you execute it in following the recipe. The mathematics are incredibly practical because you are literally measuring and weighing all of those different ingredients. It is science in the most beautiful and fascinating ways. Kitchen chemistry, mixing up a variety of ingredients and popping it into the oven and bringing it back out, and it's something else entirely different. it's it almost appears like magic,
it is.
and yet there is this beautiful, fun, experimental aspect to it
Yeah.
that allows us to put our creative spins on it, to
Yes.
theorize
Yeah.
about what's going to happen and observe
Yes,
the
if I do
actual
this, if that,
process.
yes, yes, yes. I just love the way you're describing this. It warms my heart, literally, because I'm thinking about how even in language arts, if you think about language
Yes,
arts and
yes.
poetry and things like that, writers have an immense ability to observe life, and like I'm talking about like the minute areas of life, and think about how food is such a we don't pay attention to it a lot because of a lot of things. We get into that, but when you pay attention to what you put in your body, how it affects your body, how you think
Mhm.
about it, all of those things, you get that's
All of those
poetry
things.
in and of itself, like
It
that's a that's a
absolutely
song.
is.
That's a song. I love it.
And and when you actually take the time
Mhm.
to slow down and to
Yeah.
truly be present and concentrate on the process by which our food comes from the farms or the oceans or wherever to our plate, yes, then the experiential aspect. I mean, there's so much that we love to discuss while we're actually enjoying it. So you also have that reflective process of experiential learning that encourages the mind to continue in that cyclical pattern, to evaluate how was the process compared to what I was expecting going in, and what things might I tweak or change just a little bit in the future in order to give something a better flavor, a different texture, more powerful color contrasts, and what other combinations might also be just as tasty that I haven't explored yet. And so it is a never ending cycle that can continue to build on itself in one of the most meaningful and practical ways in our daily lives, because we all have to eat.
And a lot of us like to eat. Okay,
I
most of
enjoy eating. I love it. It's a
I like
wonderful,
experimenting.
beautiful experience, and it's
Yes.
so much more rich
Yeah,
when we share it with people we love.
absolutely. It's always been. It's a part of human development to be able to share meals with people and
Yes,
think about how it's cooked, and in certain countries, probably in Albania too, it takes hours to cook certain
yes.
meals. It's like a
Not just
process.
ours, because I am a huge proponent of slow food as
Hmm.
well. And so there are things that we do that sometimes extend over days and weeks
Days.
and
You're right.
months
Hmm.
even.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
the longer and the deeper and the more of your time and energy and effort that are expended into cultivating the various ingredients that you use, the more personally invested you are in that process, the more you can learn from it. And the more you appreciate when others do that work for you.
So they say food and love. You say your grandmother put love into it. Like that's
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 right.
that's real. And I love that you mentioned experiential learning, which is a
Mhm.
cornerstone of Montessori learning. So I would highly recommend that parents and educators look into what that means. We call it in the classroom, we call it project-based learning, right? So
Mhm.
these kinds of ideas of not just having children read and replicate, but do and continue to
Yeah.
replicate and experience and experiment with their ideas and their creations and all of those things. That's
Yes.
what I said. This is the future of education, because we really have to get into this, because this is how we feel it. And everything that you were just saying it made me redefine this phrase. If you don't work, you don't eat. It
Yes.
really, it like
Yes.
literally just redefined that in my mind and gave me a deeper meaning, because we think about it as work as in like drudgery, but no, like
Mhm.
if you don't work,
Mhm.
meaning if you don't experience it, if you don't love it, if you don't have a relationship with it, that's work. It's not just work, is not just producing for someone else. I think that's a capitalist mindset around
It
food.
really and truly is. The very
Yeah.
definition of work itself has changed drastically just in the last century.
Yes.
And especially for myself, my husband, our family, the work that we do is not necessarily something tangible. You know, here we are creating in a digital space things that can benefit people that we might never meet face to face,
Mm,
might never have any sort of real and true interpersonal
mm,
contact with. And yet, the work that we are doing is not necessarily drudgery. It's not, you know,
right.
you have to put your head down and produce something for someone else. It
Mhm.
is a joyous process. It's fun.
Right. It's a
And
life affirming process. That's
yes, it
it
really,
affirms
really
life in
is.
the constant movement of. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not something that has to be divorced or very separate from
Right.
every other aspect of our daily life. The work that I'm doing right now is
Okay.
a calling. It is a
Mm.
blessing. It is a joy. And
And it's
that's what I'm most
sustainable.
excited. Yes. That's why I'm so excited to share this process
Mm.
with my family, because in order for it to be sustainable, it is something that has to be an integrated part of the life that we live each day. And I
Yes.
know that especially in the time of Corona, lots and lots of us have taken a step back to really and truly evaluate what parts of our lifestyle are sustainable.
Yes.
And if
Think
they're
about it.
not,
Yeah.
what parts are really truly things that we want to prioritize,
Mm.
whether it's our relationships,
Yes.
whether it's the place we live, whether it's the type of work that we do,
Yes.
or the sorts of people with whom we interact on a regular basis. And so it's crucial as we're going through this sort of renewal process, this reevaluation of life as a whole,
Yes. Yes.
to really determine what it is that feeds our soul. What sorts of
Yes.
things can we continue to do in the long term that are not going to just drain and deplete us, but as you said, that are nourishing, that are
Yes.
self-sustaining, that encourage us to want to do more,
Yes.
to be more, to give more. And that is not only true of our work, of our relationships, but the very lifestyle that
Yes.
we lead.
Yes. Absolutely. That, I mean, yeah, all of that. All of that. It's so critical. And when I think of food, as we were saying earlier, you can use food to teach anything. So now I'm a social studies teacher by trade, right? And so, the first thing, my lesson on, because it's a much different process of sitting and reading a book than actually experiencing certain things. This is why I love this experiential. I'm going to say that word experiential probably 100 times
Yes.
till everybody gets it. When I lived in Addis Ababa for 4 years. Okay, my daughter, we share that as well. My daughter was born in Addis Ababa, so and I remember when I first got to Addis, it was still pretty just in its natural state, right? So there was some development, but it was slow. It was moving, but um, and then there was an explosion. Like there was all these agencies coming in, international people coming in. So what happens when that happens? Food prices go up somehow,
Oh, yes.
right?
Mhm.
Now you're talking about, and this happens, I'm pretty sure in every country or many countries. Their main food stuff, teff, which is used to make injera.
Oh, I love injera.
Oh my God, it's so good. It's addictive. So, of course, the price went up.
Mhm.
The price of honey went up. They also have this honey wine
Ooh.
that, oh, if
Mm.
y'all ain't never had that, baby, you need to try that. Okay. I haven't found a good one outside of Ethiopia, but inside of Ethiopia, oh my God. Anyway, and people weren't able to really afford, like local people, just regular people weren't able to afford the amount that they were able to afford before.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so when I think about sustainability too, I think about those kinds of things. We cannot say that we are about food justice and this and that and that and this, or justice for people, when
Mhm.
something as simple as the things that they eat regularly, they can't afford anymore because now it's become a fad
Yeah.
in the international market. So we see that with,
Yeah.
for example, quinoa. in South American
Mhm.
countries. We see
Mhm.
that with avocados to a certain extent in Central and South America. So
Mhm.
we think that it's, oh, this is a super green or whatever the case may be, right? And we should eat this. But the fact of the matter is that everybody's body is different. So you really need to know your own body.
Mhm.
Number one. Number
Mhm.
two, most likely the environment you live in, whatever food grows there, is okay for your body. So for example, in Ethiopia, the best injera you're going to get is in Ethiopia because of the altitude, the way they make it, etc. The altitude affects the progress in the process and the outcome,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so, some people, for example, they have certain food lifestyles, and I tell them, like, you go to certain countries, these options are not gonna be available to you because there are literally places in the world where people, not because they are trying to misuse their body, that they don't get access to fresh fruit and vegetables. They
Mhm.
eat what they have,
I
right?
literally just had a lesson with a student where we were talking about some of the challenges
Right,
of inaccessibility
right.
of basic food stuff.
Mm,
And this was something that was a completely brand new concept.
mm,
So, and not only that, oh, like I said, after 10 years in Japan, there were so many things that I started to see in a very different way. And one of the things that I do is provide local culinary and cultural tours for some
right.
of my clients in different parts of the world. And I remember advising one of my clients while we were still in Japan about a pending visit. And this particular individual was vegetarian. And so not only did I need to warn her about the fact that vegetarianism isn't widely understood or accepted as a concept around the world, but also that there were specific key words and phrases that she was going to need to learn in the Japanese language in order to request foods that actually met with her own preferred dietary guidelines.
Yes.
Because, for example, in Asia, if you tell people that you don't eat meat, then they might consider that that's perfectly okay. They'll leave meat out of a dish.
Hmm.
But many of them also don't classify fish or
Yes.
other seafood
Right.
as a meat product. So someone who is vegetarian and avoiding all animal products might be surprised to discover that there's seafood in their vegetarian
Yes.
dish.
Yep.
So these are important, very foreign concepts that we have to consider as we move around the world, but also a very basic part of the privilege, quite frankly, that we have as Americans
Yes.
to be even presented with a choice
Yes.
of excluding whole categories of food from our diet simply by choice, because
Yes.
there are so many people around the world who don't have access, as you said, to the very basics that obtaining what we would consider a minimal sustenance level can sometimes be economically out of reach. And that is just
Economically
something that,
and geographically. You
yes,
know what I'm saying?
yes.
Like, people are not going to see it as necessary to expend the energy that is required to bring foods from a whole nother place. You know what I'm saying? They'll
Mm-hmm.
just eat what they got, and that's
Right,
it.
and we're not talking about the convenience of
Right,
being able to walk to a corner store or drive
right.
across town to
Exactly.
get what you need. We're talking about whole families and communities and large swaths of people for whom even the process of getting an education in a school, I'm talking, pre-pandemic when it was okay
Yes,
still, people,
absolutely.
when it was still safe to gather, people for whom that wasn't an option
Exactly.
because they need to walk
Mhm.
4 or 5 miles
Yep.
round trip, maybe,
Right.
just in order to get drinking water
Right.
for their family to consume. And that water may or may not even be something that we would consider acceptable for flushing our toilets.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
It's it's
we
some
have
it's a conversation I've
such
had
trouble.
before with, individuals, like, traveling, and things like that. You really have to consider where you're going, what you do. And that's
Mhm.
always one of the first things I learned. I learned the names of foods and how to order food
Yes,
in numbers when I'm traveling anywhere. This is a tip
yes,
here.
yes,
Learn numbers,
absolutely.
okay? Because you're going to have to haggle with somebody, I promise you, especially if they know you're American. It's
Oh,
just
yes.
what it is. Okay. And learning the foods, because you know, you may want to bring things with you that you or feel like you can't live without, things like that, that are transferable, of course. But this is a huge conversation. So I really want to get into, because I love the article that you sent me about how when you went to different places with your son and, you know,
Mhm.
exploring the place through the food. And as you were,
Yeah.
you know, writing, and I was like, I could taste the oranges in California. And I was like, I like this article. It make me hungry, but it's juicy.
Yes.
Yes.
Mission accomplished. It's a
Yes.
really, really juicy subject. It
Yes.
really is. And part of the reason that I really even decided to continue to pursue this is because of the reactions that I have gotten in a number of different places around the world from parents and administrators and even other educators who wanted to really minimize the role that food and food preparation,
Yeah.
even lunchtime,
Hmm.
wanting to minimize the importance of that time as an educational opportunity for our children. In fact, when I was in the early planning stages of my international Montessori school in Japan, one of the things that I did as I was sitting down with my staff was discuss some of the different activities that we were going to do in and around the classroom. And at one of the early meetings with some of our prospective parents, as we were discussing the fact that we were planning to prepare some of the meals with the children, many of them were, quite frankly, disappointed and thought that that was a waste of our time. And they really wanted to know why we weren't planning to spend more time essentially drilling the
Academic.
children on
Yeah.
their academics. Exactly. And by the time we wrapped up and shut down everything in our school before we moved to Italy, we were literally preparing snacks and lunches with the children every single day. The families who were with us at that time had participated not only in family gatherings, but full pop up restaurant dinners, and had helped with the preparation of a variety of different global cuisines for
Nice.
international festivals attended by thousands within our community.
Nice.
And through that process of interacting with the food, combining even very familiar things in ways that were new to them, and the conversations we had throughout that process, they realized just how much learning was actually happening with cooking as an activity. And they were so sorry to see that aspect of their children's education disappearing as we left. But I know that more and more of them were excited to be able to incorporate that into
Yes.
their homes, because that's how we sort of evolved from the cooking, the teaching that we were doing within the four walls of our brick and mortar school there in Japan, to expand to be able to do this online by sharing the lessons and the juicy articles like you read, and the videos and the pictures and the stories from our travels around the world, because there is something to be learned in every single stage of the process, from planting the first seeds in the
Yes. Yes.
ground,
Yes.
raising the animals
Yes.
from hatchlings,
Yes.
babies,
Yes.
to the cooking and bringing everything to the table, and even in the cleaning up after it's all finished. It's all learning.
It is all learning. And it's so funny that that just brought two stories to mind. One was when I was younger and I went to visit my grandmother in Jamaica, and we were staying at a house down the street from her home. She lives in the countryside. Her home is in the countryside. She doesn't live there currently. She's here, but in New Jersey. But she was there at the time. And in the morning I woke up and I heard the goat, crying. Right? And then I heard it stop. I was like, oh, okay, well, it must be, it's okay now. Come to find out, I don't walk down the street. The goat was dead. Okay, it's hanging up. It's ready to eat.
Yeah. Mhm.
I did not eat goat for a couple of years because I was
Oh,
traumatized.
oh no.
Fast forward, I'm working in a school and the classroom had some baby chicks in the class. And I said something or another, like out loud, like, oh, something about chickens and, eating chicken. And the teacher was like, no, we don't want them to know that. And I was like, why not? You know what I'm saying? Like, I probably wouldn't have been so traumatized if I would have known, or thought, been able
Yes.
to really go through that process. This is life. And it really, I think that it would connect our young people closer to how they consume.
Mhm.
This is economics now. Consuming, when you understand the process of what it really
Yes.
takes, you know?
Yes. 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 1,000 times yes. One of the one of the most memorable experiences for us as a family was a special little trip to the beach that we took while we were living way up close to the northern tip of New Zealand. And not only did we have the opportunity to spend some time on a local dairy farm, we
Nice.
milked the cows and had really fresh milk. Um, but as I said, we were close to the water.
Mhm.
And not only did we go out and play and swim and splash around and, walk through the sand, but we actually went out and we caught fish as well.
Nice. I've been
And my son, he was probably only about 7 years old at the time, but he helped to bring in the fish and he helped to clean the fish and to fillet the fish and to fry the fish.
mhm.
And this was probably by far the best fish and chips meal we have ever had in our entire lives. And
Give
we
me
had some friends who promised us that we could only get the best fish and chips in London. And we spent some time there. We had fish and chips there, but nothing beats people talk about farm to table all the time, but
right.
to bring your food in literally from the ocean,
That's true farm to table.
it and having it on the table that night, it doesn't get any fresher than that. And when there is, again, this appreciation
Yes.
for the actual process
Mhm.
that it takes
Yep.
for it to come from its source to your plate, and a true consideration of the life that was given for
Yes.
us to enjoy that meal. I mean, my son watched the fish flopping around
Yeah.
and he took part in the cleaning and the filleting with the knife work and the scaling and all of that. To be involved in the process, literally from start to finish, made the meal that much more memorable. And those are the kinds of experiences that you simply can't replicate
Okay.
by reading a textbook
There's
or
no way
completing
for
a
you.
workbook.
There's
It's not
no
the
way for you
same.
to conceptualize by just sitting and
Mm.
reading.
And
This is
we
the
don't
age.
expect that, especially from young children.
We don't expect.
We would
Yes.
never
Yes.
expect somebody to say, here, read this book, follow the instructions, now you can juggle. It's like,
Right.
no, you have to actually get
Go
balls
through
or
the
scarves
process.
or
Yes.
objects in your hands. You
Yeah.
have to throw them. You're going to be expected to drop them numerous times
Mhm.
before figuring out the coordination and then maybe going back to the learning
Yeah.
and figuring out new patterns and angles and techniques and
Yeah.
practicing them again and again and again. Because until you actually have your hands around these physical objects, until you feel the weight, until you drop them on your toe or on your head multiple times, it's nothing more than an abstract concept.
Exactly. It's
And
you have to
learning doesn't
build.
happen abstractly.
Right. And we learn, for example, in physical science, PE, whatever you call it. What do you call it? The gym. When you work out. Look, gym. That, in order to athletes learn, you have to build memory in your muscles,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
But you don't build memory by reading the book and saying, oh, this is how you work your rotor cuff or whatever you call it,
Right.
rotator cuff. You have to actually physically work it over and over and over again to build the muscle memory of doing that thing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, again, we really have to shift in
Mm-hmm.
classrooms to having young people involved in
Yes.
doing what it is. So if you're teaching government, um, how do I get my children in the classroom to act as if they're government officials. What does it mean? And how do you
Yes.
function in a Congress? And how do you write a bill? And is this the bill and the law that you would want to write and pass? You know, the actual doing, not just, I'm talking social studies, politics stuff. That's
No,
why.
no, this is good because
But
what you're talking about here is not the abstract concept,
correct.
but we're talking about the very physical act of being involved in the decision-making process. And that only happens by giving the learners the opportunity to make decisions and then to follow through with what happens after they make those decisions so that they can experience the consequences of those decisions and learn about that process in a very meaningful way. And that's what we're doing with our food. I have so many parents who come to me and say, but my child won't eat this, and I've tried it 5 different ways. And I said, well, what does your child like to eat? Well, my child only eats, okay, well, what else does your child find attractive or interesting when you go to visit your local market? Oh, well, I don't take my child shopping with me. I say, well, hold on, let's back it up a little
Right.
bit. Because if your child is not interested in the process, that's one thing. But if the child never has the opportunity to be involved in the decision-making process from the very beginning, how do you expect them to get invested later on in the process? Just you expect them to just constantly inhale everything that you put in front of them without question?
Yeah.
And I know that as parents, that's not the sort of independent individual we're really looking to raise. When asked, most parents say, no, I want my child to be discerning. I want the child
Right.
to make
You have a little bit
decisions.
of
I want
experience.
exactly, so that we have to
That's where that
we
comes
have
from.
to
Doesn't
extend that
fall out the sky.
opportunity earlier in the process. We want them to make responsible decisions, and we need to give them the opportunity to make those decisions, to be involved in the process of selecting what's for dinner,
Because
and
as
even
you
if there's
said,
friends in there,
yeah,
because then they take ownership of it. They
and
say,
as
that's
you
my
said,
choice, that's my
exactly.
idea.
And as you
Yes.
said, food is not just, putting it in your mouth, it's looking at it.
Mm-mm.
Have you ever
Mhm.
looked at something and been like, I want to try that,
Yes.
or you looked at something and was like, we not gonna do
Mm,
that,
mm,
you know, you know? And so you, as you said, using your
absolutely.
all of your senses, including your
Mhm.
sixth sense, because there's some things that you
Mm.
may just be attracted to based off, I just want to try that.
Yes,
And that's okay too.
yes.
So yeah, I
Mhm.
totally agree with that. And that's incredibly important when it comes to fresh food because you really need to touch it, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think it's also time for us to bring back butchers, being familiar with
Oh,
our local butchers, and bringing those people back, because they really take care and
mm,
pride in their ability.
absolutely. One of the things that I have loved about traveling the world with my family is that the way in which we shop for different ingredients has been drastically different
Mm,
in different countries and on different continents. You mentioned butchers. Well, that's something with which we're familiar here in Albania.
mm,
And in fact, we have access to a number of different shops where people are, the people from whom we are making the purchases are literally the farmers who have grown the produce
yep.
or who have raised the animals. We
Yes.
have a neighbor who raises chickens, and so we got some of the
Life
freshest
goals.
chicken. But she says, oh, hey, by the way, I have a chicken from my hive flock today if you'd like to purchase that, or, oh, literally just have on my kitchen counter right now a watermelon that she grew completely organically without any, chemical pesticides
With the
or,
seeds in it.
whatever, with seeds and everything, all from seeds.
Love it. I love
It
it.
was we were so excited to see that and the drastically different flavor and texture and aroma of all of these different ingredients when we have access to them so close to the source
Yes.
is
Different
something that is
energy. It's a
Completely, it's incomparable.
it's a different energy. I'm telling you, there's such a different energy. Again, living
Yeah.
overseas, my aunt would always say, we came from Jamaica where we, own land and things like that. And,
Hmm.
we didn't know the beauty of the fact that we were eating organic food. We were eating the best food, this food that now people are paying premium price for.
Yes,
Right?
yes, yes.
When I was in Ethiopia, even the concept of organic, when I was in Ethiopia, we would get food from people who literally just got the eggs from their chickens. Okay, I mean,
Hmm.
literally poop still on them. Like you got to clean it real well.
Yes. Don't tell it.
And, and getting vegetables from people who like it's a completely different conversation you have to have with cleaning your food with it's just a different energy and a different level of appreciation, and I think that is a great way for families that are in at home right now to explore. I know I'm blessed to live in an area where there's a lot of farms. So one of the things that we will be doing in the coming weeks is myself and daughter will be going to the farm that's literally in our backyard and going to, check out the animals, see how we can volunteer, how she can volunteer regularly, myself as well, because I will be right next to her. And
Yeah.
learn how the processes, because these things are so absolutely critical. I have my little balcony garden. I don't live in a house, but there's always a way to do something to keep
Yes.
yourself connected to the process of raising food. If you live around farmers, that's a great place to take your children. Go to the farm, go talk to them. If you should just talk to the farmers, talk to them, have a conversation. Trust me, they want to talk to you. Okay,
Oh, farmers love
they love it.
talking about their work,
Yeah.
and it's the most incredible edible education that you
Yes.
could ever possibly conceive of. And one of my constant drives for encouraging parents and other educators and child care workers to involve the children
Yes.
in the process of sourcing and preparing the foods that they eat is because not just because we learn so much from it, but because there is no reason to exclude people from that process just
Yes.
because of their age. I remember how drastically differently I started to perceive the world around me and the food on my plate when I got to Italy, when I'm in this cooking school and I've got my hands around the teats of a sheep and I'm pulling the milk myself,
Yeah.
when we're scraping the honey from the combs of the bees
Yeah.
that are kept out in the fields,
Yes.
and you can taste the differences in
Yes.
the flavor of the honey
Yes.
because the bees
Some
came to
bees.
pollinate one set of flowers over here, and this other honey that's a completely different color and texture and aroma and flavor because it was in a different season from bees collecting the exact same flowers just at a different time of the
Yep.
year.
Yep.
And there is nothing on this earth that can fire off as many neurons and create as many connections in
Possibilities.
our
Yeah.
brains
Mm.
as it does when we involve all five of our senses,
Yes.
when we are interested and excited
Yeah.
about the process, and when it has so much practical meaning in
Mm.
our day to day existence. And that's really what I want to encourage parents to recognize, not just with the food, but with every
Everything.
single aspect of the educational journey that we're on as a family.
Yeah.
It can all be that much fun. It can all be
Yeah.
that meaningful and that memorable when we all have ownership in
Yeah.
the process, when we're all so deeply invested.
And that's a beautiful point that we're going to end on. It's not just about your child learning, you're learning as well.
Yes.
You're unlearning and relearning as a parent. And if you keep that at the top of your brain, that, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just trying to get my child to learn this thing. No, no, no. Y'all learning together. Okay. And this is a family affair. Okay.
Absolutely. And I would be the first to admit that I don't know everything. And my
I,
child will tell you, no, mommy is fallible, mommy is human, mommy makes mistakes. Absolutely.
we are
Because that's a
constantly
part
learning.
of the learning process too, is me modeling for
Absolutely.
my child what it looks like to go from not knowing to finding the necessary resources, to exploring, experimenting, making mistakes, and learning something new, and then incorporating that into our lives.
Absolutely.
And that is so very visible and practical and understandable with
Exactly.
the food. And that translates to every area.
Everything. And it makes your children fearless, right? It makes them
Love that word.
understand that
Yes.
life is a process as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to what I feel in the current education system is, oh, we discovered this and we come here and then that's it. No,
Mm-hmm.
that's absolutely not true. Okay, but I feel
That
like,
only works in an academic bubble. That's not the way we live in the real world.
and the funny thing is, Karen, it doesn't even work in the academic bubble. Theories are constantly changing.
This is true.
But we don't treat the actual educating process as if this is what it must be. Yes, there are certain processes, like, okay, when you're growing certain plants, there are certain things you can do to, but there's always room for understanding and change
Yes.
and
And
shifting.
that process can be different
Right.
for different people at
Exactly.
different stages in their life and development as well. And when we recognize that fact, that very individuality of
Yes.
every learner, and
Yes.
the process can really grow and mature with them. And
Yes.
that's part of what I love and have really and truly internalized about my Montessori training.
Mm,
It comes back to following the child.
yes.
And that's what I love, why I appreciate. I keep looking over here because my son is spinning around in his chair as he's
Hey,
learning over here on his own screen.
only
But
said hi.
this is a process that we're all involved in together. It is a family educational journey, and it's exciting to
It is.
be able to follow his interests and his observations and his passions
Yes.
to truly help him to embrace every aspect of his ownership in the
Yes,
learning.
embodying his process. That is amazing. So, with that said, I can't even, so many, drop the mic moments here. I love it. And I pray that, families get a lot of nuggets that they can use to shift their mindset and their energy around what it means to educate their children, and know that they don't have to adhere to the rigid standards. Your child will absolutely be fine and successful when they are following a path of learning and understanding life. It's infallible, in my opinion.
We were
So
born to learn.
we were
We,
born.
we have to we have to actively interfere with the process in order
Yes,
to not learn. So
right,
it's a joyous journey to be on.
right. So if you could leave any tips for families, for parents, and children, what would you leave? And let everyone know how they can stay in touch with you, connect with you.
I think if I could offer one final piece of advice, especially as parents are evaluating their options for what their children's, their family's educational journey is going to look like moving forward in the time of COVID,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that it's really important to remember that education really can be a joyous,
Mm.
lifelong journey.
Yes, I love that.
So that helps, I hope, to diminish the fears about what's going to happen next week or next month or next year. Because, yes, the decisions that we make in the coming weeks and months and years are important, but that's just a small snippet of the lifelong journey that is this love of learning
Yes.
that I'm on a mission to instill
Mm.
in learners of all ages.
Yes. Yes.
And that's what I really focus on doing,
I love it.
using our family's food and our travels and the little snippets of our family life as we gallivant around the globe
I
at
love it.
ourkitchenclassroom.com. And so you can find us there on our webpage. And you could get even more interpersonal interaction by joining us in our Play with Your Food community.
I love that
And you can
community.
find us there online. It's a lot of fun.
I
We
love
literally do play with our food. We get creative. We think outside. We don't just think outside the box. We hack open the box, we crush the box, we torch
Ain't
the
no
box,
box.
and
Yeah.
then we cook the food in
Right.
the burnt box.
And hey, I love it. You hear me? That is on point right there. Right. I want
It really and truly is more than just our approach to food. It
yes.
is really our approach to life, and that's the joy that we want to spread.
Amen. I love that. Ah, thank you, Karen. This was so
Thank
lovely.
you.
It was so
It has
lovely
been
speaking to
such
you.
a
I
privilege.
remember when I first met you and you were so jolly and happy, and I was like, oh, I love it. So I knew that this moment would come. I knew this moment would come, and I look forward to speaking with you more and being able to collaborate with you on other things. And I just really appreciate all that you do in the education community. It is absolutely priceless, valuable, and I love it. So thank you so much for joining, and
Thank
thank you to
you.
everyone for listening. Continue to tune in to the various episodes so that you can get tips and tools and expertise from world class, what I call world class educators. So thank you so much, Karen, for joining that ranks with me.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much.
Absolutely.